Today I had an appointment with a lady who does this hair analysis which gives epigenetic information. And I went there and I was there at 10 and I thought my appointment was at 10. But it was at 10:30 and I called her assistant and said my name. He didn't even have me on the computer. And then he said, oh, it's double booked, but he still didn't say it was me that was double booked. So it was just really confusing. I don't know what he actually saw on his screen. And then I ended up leaving because I live close by, so I wanted to make sure the other person got in to see her, because I've seen her before for other things. She's really, really good. And she said she'd give me a bit of a deal. I have an appointment next Wednesday now. But it just felt like glitch in technology scenario. Sometimes when I get to certain places in consciousness, or when certain levels of consciousness are filtering through me, technology stops working properly. I've had instances where I text somebody as me, but then that text turns into a text from somebody else on the other end, and I say something and they're like, did you just text me blah blah blah, because it said blah 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 from blah blah blah. Long story short, it was just really confusing, and I was like, whoa, I'm just in that place where technology doesn't work. And actually, now that I think about it, I think it's the domain of the brain starting to work as a quantum computer, because there's more possibilities existing at the same time. There's overlapping realities, and I feel like I go into that state to sort of resolve some of the overlapping realities that are possible, including maybe preventing people from dying in my reality. It makes weird. It doesn't make any sense. I know what I'm trying to say, but it's being in a state of being identified with consciousness, not with the body. And so the consciousness is rearranging things and rearranging bodies, because consciousness is filtered through bodies. So I think I did talk before about how it's a quantum computation state, and so it's confusing because there are multiple realities overlapping simultaneously. And it's odd because when one gets to that state where multiple realities are overlapping simultaneously and they're perhaps able to be in higher states of consciousness and choose a different path, reality collapses the wave function around the person being mentally ill, as opposed to maybe collapsing it around them being a shaman or a mystic or so many other things that happen in other cultures, or are even possibilities within our culture if we start to see it and frame it in a different way. And the thing is that as individuals get to those higher states of consciousness and have to go back down, if they were able to stay up, all of reality would have to level up, and then lower levels of consciousness would be edited out, and that means people get edited out. And with this glitch today, I sort of realized that there could be two realities. Like in one reality, he put me in the computer, and in the one he's in now, he didn't put me in the computer, and he doesn't even remember me. So I remember that, but I think people, when they're in the level of programming, can actually forget those things. So the confusion exists in the one that remembers the two overlapping realities, and the person that doesn't remember is like, what are you talking about? You're just crazy. So seeing things from a higher perspective is confusing, and sometimes I have to be like, okay, well, that was kind of a glitch in the matrix for me. For them, it just was like, well, I don't think I put that in there. And your name's not even in the computer on my side, yet I saw it in the computer on the lady's side who I was going to see. Is symbolic, and part of it is material, and part of it is communication. So at a different level of consciousness, it's actually hard to communicate with those at lower levels of consciousness because they're distracted. They're who knows, doing 10 things at once, and then you try to say something and you think they actually get what you're saying and they don't. So it's difficult for different levels of consciousness to communicate with each other. It's really strange. I actually have a sense that the programs and the habits are actually like computer programs. Words and thoughts are like computer programs, and they take us over. Those mind viruses, and through the process of map consciousness, psychosis, mania, we're actually being decoupled from that computer programming, and we're actually getting into a state where we're trying to relearn how to be humans and not rely on that programming, because everybody's relying on that programming. And then some of us go into a place where we're starting to practice not being attached to that programming, but then we eventually get captured and put into a different kind of programming for us to never again explore not acting based on our past programming. And I feel like once we start to act in the moment, not based on our past programming, we're fully alive as human beings. Otherwise, we're just alive as a biological phenomenon, but we're not actually living life. We're being lived by the programming. We're just hosts to this programming. I actually feel like technology is more fundamental than biology, and technology created biology. And it's a matter of biology trying to be reborn out of the technology. Anyways, I haven't really fully figured that out yet. And it might be one of those things I don't want to figure out, because I sort of realized I'm totally alone. And I'm totally responsible. And I think this is what we get connected with when we feel like, oh, I have to save the world and I have to do all this stuff. It's because we're actually alone in our aliveness. Whereas everyone's sort of in their computer mind. Everyone is sort of like a computer with a screensaver up. There's some processing going on in the background, but it's not really awake. I'm sure I'll go into that more later. There's just something about this consciousness, quantum computation, and level of consciousness being funneled through biology. And right now it's being converted into thought, which is controlling us through habits and programs. It's not being channeled into creating life. It's not being channeled into being creative. And so I did quit my job, and I have 2 weeks to go. So I will have to do some more work in these next 2 weeks, so I might not have much time to talk to myself. But I feel I need to talk to myself at least half an hour a day, and then it takes half an hour to edit that. So that's an hour a day, whereas if I make an hour and a half of stuff, that's 3 hours, and that might be a little too much right now, but I just want to remind myself that it's good to at least talk to myself somewhat, especially because these 2 weeks will be pretty intense in terms of thinking about the mental health system, which is a lower level of consciousness than I want to be a channel of. And for California, I'm thinking of making a medical ID tag bracelet, and you can type in stuff online of what you want it to say. And so I typed in some stuff that's sort of like a spoof medical ID, and I'll insert the picture here. What do you think? Should I do that? Do you think anyone will understand what that means? I won't do it that way. That wouldn't be good. But I do want to write something on it that is a little bit out there, but not too out there, because the purpose is still for me to get help if I need it. If I go too far into the quantum domain and get afraid because I'm there all by myself, then computer people will come and rescue me and medicate me back into this reality. And that's fine. I was thinking about a symbol for a trans-conscious neurotribe. And so I created a sticker with this website because I looked up rainbow brain, because the autism neurotribe has a rainbow infinity symbol as their symbol for their neurotribe. And so I was thinking, well, what about a brain that's a rainbow color? So I found that, and then it was a website that you can create stickers. So I created a sticker, and it has a brain that is rainbow, and then it's in the shape of a heart around the brain. So the rainbow brain, and then the heart, and the background is black. And then I put in this writing over top of the brain, trans-conscious altruists. And I don't know if that's a good name. I'm sure there could be infinite names to describe it, but basically it is talking about how consciousness can be trans. One can identify as one's ego self, or one can identify as the self, or consciousness itself, or the whole, or oneness, or whatever the heck you want to call it. And I like the altruist part, because part of that, I feel, is that it's a state where we get in connection with altruism because we see we're all one. So it's not, oh, I need to be altruistic. That's how we are innately when we see that we are one. And altruism is selfless service, and that itself acknowledges that we don't have a self, we don't have an ego. It's a necessary construct as part of programming, and maybe we need it in order to operate in the programming of society. We need to be aware of those programs in order to somewhat operate. And actually that could be part of the struggle of autism, is that the brain can't be programmed in that way with language, with word viruses. So it's difficult for them to operate in society, which is just based on programs, on all these constructs that we've been given, and they have difficulty with them. And I think that that's part of the evolution of consciousness, is to not be able to be programmed in that way, whether it's through the transconscious process later in life, or whether it's by being born on the autism spectrum. And it seems like consciousness is starting to edit out the programming. It's almost like it's saying, okay, we don't need these programs anymore. We needed them in order to create these structures, but now it's become too much. We have to actually put the humanity back in all of these structures that we've created. It was great to be able to build it all, but now we need that humanity. And Temple Grandin wrote a book called The Unwritten Rules of Society, because she saw all these rules that she could see, but they're not written. And I don't think they're written because they're programmed into us. But she couldn't be programmed with them, so she had to actually observe what these rules were of society to live by. So in the same way, what I'm saying is a transconscious person can still appear to operate as if they have an ego, this solid ego. And maybe they do have some to a certain extent, but it's not really solid. It's more convenience to actually interact with the programming of society. And then when one isn't in society, one doesn't need to be actually believing in those programs. I'm wondering if the light body version of a person is their non-programmed version, and that's always there as the original trajectory, and then the programming writes over that, and that can be eliminated in an instant. And I remember how I looked at this woman at 7-Eleven and she turned into her flamboyant version of herself, and then I looked away and looked back and she was back to that old sort of tired out, worn out person version of herself. So it's actually there. We're all living as that beautiful version of ourselves. It's just a matter of actually getting in alignment with that, which can happen in an instant. It doesn't take time. And there's nothing we can do to get there because it's already here. We actually just have to see the programming, really, and negate the programming. Like, that's just programming. Goodbye. And I feel consciousness is transitioning the brain. It's transitioning the brain out of that habitual programmed mode into more degrees of freedom of gesture and movement. And that is what it is to really be alive, not to be programmed. Perhaps some of these are memes for a new neurotribe. They're weems, they're not memes. Memes are about a separate me. And there is no separate me from life. There's we. I feel manic consciousness is partly powerful words, powerful memes, powerful weems from powerful observation. I wonder if first we have to be altruistic towards ourselves. Save ourselves first. Sort of like in an airplane, you're instructed to put on your oxygen mask before helping others. Well, perhaps in trans consciousness we have to put on our oxytocin mask before helping others. The inner human dimensions, that compassion, that love, can't be programmed. And maybe it's the only thing that can erase the programming. I was thinking about how that woman I know visited me in the psych ward in April. And after her visit, my level of consciousness shifted upwards quite significantly. It could have been the accumulation of people visiting too. We're trying to transfer everything else besides the inner human dimensions that can't be programmed to the machines. So it's really important that as we create more technology and export these mechanical aspects of humanity to the machines, that we're equally able to reconnect with our inner human dimensions, the things that can't be programmed. And it's probably a complete reciprocal or inverse relationship that has to happen. Articulation creates neurons articulating context. We have to learn how to not exist as habits, which just means we have to learn, because if we're learning, we're not being habitual. MAP consciousness is brain puberty. It goes from the me circuits of the prefrontal cortex and dopamine to the we circuits of the whole brain and oxytocin in the body, which gets us actually realizing that we have a body. I might have talked about this before, but Amy Cuddy talks about the power poses and how standing a certain way for a few minutes can make us feel better. Well, imagine always being altruistic and always acting in oneness and always being kind. Those are actions, those are gestures, and those are going to make us feel good too. And I think self-dialogue might make us feel better too. The gesture of self-dialogue could be an act of compassion and self-love, giving the brain a chance to talk to itself in a different way than we're used to. We have these repetitive thoughts happening, and we don't actually activate a process, a conversation with ourselves, a dialogue with ourselves. And we're looking for our own brain. We're looking for our brain to be active and to be growing and to be neuroplastic. And the process of self-dialogue helps with this. And that's actually what we're trying to activate by all of our seeking, when we could just sit here and talk to ourselves and then find, when our brain actually turns back on properly, that now we're more engaged in each moment of the day, and there's nothing to seek because each moment is here with us when it arrives, and that's all there is. And this process of self-dialogue is making psychiatry obsolete for myself, because I remember being in the psych ward and wanting to make that paternalistic psychiatry obsolete. It can be helpful to have medication and things at times, but to be paternalized like that is not helpful. It's very detrimental. It's the opposite of unconditional love. So this process of self-dialogue perhaps is helping me make it obsolete within my own neurology. And I'm finding when I have conversations that what I say feels more powerful and empowering as it's more in alignment with what I've been talking to myself about, which is how I would choose to think about things, or the context I've created for myself to be able to uphold that. I make oxytocin through my own gestures, which is relational, and I grow brain cells with my words, which are vibrational, and self-dialogue, which is conversational. So I become my own pharmacist in my own pharmacy, inwardly.